Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, free agency apparently starts Monday, but it feels like it's already getting started. We'll bring you the latest from the Suns and what to watch for Monday, starting with Bradley Beal. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm Brendon Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed Suns media member. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to kick off free agency Monday. Don't forget, Locked On Suns free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Just click that follow or subscribe button. Do what thousands of other Suns fans have already done. Become an everydayer. Get locked on to the Phoenix Suns right here each and every day. We've got a lot to get to. Bradley Beal, Nick Richards, Chris Paul. Yes, that's right. You heard me. Today's show brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $150 and get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Joining me for this free agency preview / we're already reviewing some things, as always, from the Wild West Valley, my fellow Suns credentialed media member. How are we feeling, Ben Garcia?
Better than I was a week ago. Remember this time a week ago, we were talking about that Kevin Durant trade, and it felt like it didn't work out. And, time goes by. The Suns, it feels like, for all extensive purposes, aced the draft. I'm just really curious where they're going to go about free agency, because as we'll get into it, I think it's a little bit more difficult than I think even Suns fans think it is, even though they know they're a team in the second apron. We'll talk about some of the other obstacles, but it's interesting, man.
Yeah, a lot to get to. Let's dive in. Bradley Beal came up, as he has been for weeks, if not months, on Saturday quite a bit from both Fred Katz at The Athletic, who I will remind people covered Beal in Washington for many years, and Zach Lowe over at The Ringer, with similar reports basically amounting to how difficult it is going to be to move him. Now, that's not news, but I think that Fred's report, Ben, had a lot of, from Beal's perspective, that's helpful to think about here, right? So he said it's the same as it was at the 2025 deadline, according to a league source familiar with Beal's thought process. Beal would be open to the right trade that sends him to the right destination, but his preference is to remain in Phoenix, even if it's a team that obviously only won 35 games and just lost Kevin Durant. It went on to say that since leaving Washington, Beal's wife and children lived in LA his first season here, and then this year they finally moved to Phoenix. Playing for another team would make him have to pull his kids out of school for a third straight year and move his family once again, or leave them and go play in a different city, potentially for 2 years, because that's what's left on his contract. So, obviously, you go on and what we've been talking about becomes the focus, waiving and stretching him, buying him out completely, etc. But the last line that I think is relevant from Fred's piece here is, even if the Suns could find a way to waive and stretch Brad, they would need him to give some money back, and it isn't possible without Beal giving money back, which Fred wrote would be out of character. And of course, that's like a polite way of saying, and it's no shade on Brad, but He's never been a dude to give money back. He waited until he could get this huge, gigantic contract from Washington. He not only got it, but got the no-trade clause, and he's negotiated for every single penny and every single little thing he could throughout his entire NBA career, even at times with the Wizards when people wondered, why don't you want to go to a winning team? He has just handled his business that way. So I think that that's relevant when we start imagining, this team would love him on the mid-level and this and that, Ben, because this requires him to play ball just as much, frankly, as the no-trade clause. It may not be as harsh, but he has to participate in the next team he goes to go find a mid-level exception contract or some new deal that would allow him to take some money off of what the Suns are going to owe him and do the wave and stretch that will work under league rules. I think that part gets overlooked a lot, is Brad still has to play ball even if they do it that way.
Because they cannot have a certain amount of dead money exceed per the aprons and tax and the new CBA.
15% of the cap. Yep. And they already have Nasir Little and EJ Liddell. They've done this already so many times that now they're up against it.
Yeah. Who is it? Nasir Little, EJ Liddell, or EJ Liddell, and who's the other one?
That's it.
Okay. I don't remember how much
Beal
this
would
year
be
Little
such a
was.
huge amount that even him by himself gets you almost all the way to that number, and then those two guys obviously get you over it.
I think, I mean, listen, man, I don't have to preach to the choir when it comes to you because you and I have been on the same page to this. I'm assuming, I don't want to speak for you, we see it way more difficult to move Bradley Beal. It seems like people are like, because it's the offseason, it's going to be easier. I don't see any reason why it's going to be easier. And I'm not going to fault Beal for doing what a lot of NBA players have done, is taking all the money they can. Unless it's a Miami, like it's got to be a very desirable location that Beal can convince. It's not just him, man. It's his family that he would need to go somewhere. Like, I don't see a realm where this happens. So when people try to ship him off to the Pelicans or the Bulls and make obscure, like, oh, Billy Donovan and him, like they have a connection with Florida, I don't see it, man. Phoenix is a really great place to be. He wants to raise his kids here. I get it. So when the first thing I remember when I saw that Fred Katz thing was that you had reminded me a couple of months ago that this is a guy that covered Beal very intently. This leads me to believe Beal's not going anywhere, man, because this is Beal's way of leaking out to the public. I really like it here. If you want to find me a very desirable location, sure. But I don't see the combination of a really great place to be, a team that isn't potentially in the pits.
Yeah, he doesn't want to go tank somewhere.
Yeah,
I mean, the Suns aren't going to be a
Bradley
championship team this year.
But they're not going to be terrible.
Exactly. And so I think that's why
He doesn't
people
want to
have
go to the
led.
Bulls.
That's why people have led back to Miami. Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think he could have maybe gone to the Bulls in January if he wanted to, right? And so Zach Lowe had this. Go ahead.
Continue. I was just going to say, and just to preface on that, like everyone keeps pointing at Miami. Miami has had a few chances to bring Bradley Beal in, and each time they say, we're good.
So let's preface it by saying that Zach Lowe had this report where he linked the Heat to Beal, Duncan Robinson, Terry Rozier. In theory, Andrew Wiggins' contract could be used, but I just don't think that they're going to do that. He's a more valuable position, and he makes less total money, and I think that they could probably use him in a different type of trade. So to me, it was going to have to be Duncan Robinson and Terry Rozier. I do think Miami is a team that checks some of those boxes where they are still apparently trying to win. They have Hero and Bam. They're not going to be terrible. And it's a good weather city. It's a desirable market and all those types of things. But then right as we were about to start recording and talking about this, Duncan Robinson opts out, Ben. And so that happened Sunday midday, and that makes it a lot more complicated because now it would have to be some kind of sign and trade or something like that. And then at that point, it's like, well, Miami would have had the impetus to trade him if he opted in my opinion, because they don't want to have him on the team. But why would they choose to work with him on a sign and trade and then still have pressure to get off of his money when they're the ones who would have to be giving him that money again in order to do a sign? Like, it doesn't really math out to me anymore. And so I don't see it. I don't see a place for it. And so, we're on the same page. I think you mentioned that too. We've been on the same page for a while. I would say we have people locally like Gambo who continue to say that the Suns are really dead set on not having him around next season. I don't know how desperate they'd be trying to get, or that would they send him home for the year and say, we'll buy you out next summer? Would the union be chill with that? I mean, there's all sorts of things that get really, really ugly if you want to push it. But with all of that said, what do you think is the best plan that achieves what the Suns want to a degree? Beal obviously gets final say on any of these pathways and doesn't burn the whole situation down to such an ugly level. What do you think is the best way forward with this situation?
I've thought about this literally, man, when I'm trying to fall asleep. Like, what is the best avenue for Bradley Beal to be shipped off to? And I think it's pretty clear, man. I don't think Brad is going to accept a trade anywhere because of the family situation, which I do understand that aspect. He doesn't want to pull his kids out of school again. He doesn't want to ask his wife to move potentially cross country again. I get all that. But I also see the Suns side, too, of like, you don't fit here. Fans don't really like you. We don't really like you. You don't do really, really well with the media last year. I think they're going to bring him back because they have to. Now, it continues to be very alarming to me, man, because Gambo continues to say, like, he's gone. But unless Brad is taking a $30 million pay cut, I believe it is, $80 million out of that 110 that's remaining, I don't see Brad as a very charitable dude just to give away money.
It's not a pay cut, right? It's not.
No, he has to give the money back. It's not a pay cut.
He would be getting it from his next team and all that. I mean, but then it's like, is it exactly perfect? Does he lose a couple million here and there? That's where the idea of like Fred Katz saying like out of character comes in. Like I know it always seems, he's giving it back. He's getting the same amount, but he just has to cooperate and potentially take a little bit of a haircut. But he's not losing 30. He'd maybe be losing 2, 5, 6, whatever.
Potentially. That's also,
we don't know. It's all hypothetical.
Yeah, it's all hypothetical because we don't know if he's a mid-level exemption player. We don't know if he's a vet minimum guy. Also, would he?
Well, if he's a vet minimum, it doesn't work. He can't basically do it. Yeah.
So if it
has to be basically at least the mid-level is what we're talking about. At least that over multiple seasons. And then you don't even get into the fact of like, well, which team's going to actually give that to him? So
that was one of the things
that before. But what do you think is how do they go forward?
I think he's sticking it around, man. I think they're going to have to keep him around. I don't think it is any use. Not that I want him here. I don't think it is any use to anyone to piss off Bradley Beal any further, make that relationship more toxic than it is, try to find a role from him, bring him off the bench, play him limited minutes. I don't think there's a world where you can send him home. I agree with you. I don't think the NBA PA is going to like that unless Brad agrees to be sent home, but he doesn't peg me for the guy that doesn't want to do anything. But I think they're just going to have to bring him off the bench. They know he's someone that's kind of made of glass, so they can't put him in the starting lineup. They can't continue to change up things because he can't be healthy. I don't see it, man. I was looking through it last night as well. I don't see a team that is going to be willing to take Bradley Beal on, that isn't tanking, that is a desirable location that he would move his family to. That's my answer to it. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the other players on the mid-level market, and there's a lot of players that I would at least like equally, right? And that's what we talked about before. Bruce Brown, for instance, or D'Angelo Russell, guys that at the very least are healthier, if not just a more easy fit. And so, yeah, I think that what will happen is they will play him as a 7th, 8th man this season. Basically, treat him like he's Lou Williams or something. Treat him like he's that type of player. And I would even say maybe closer to the end of the season, depending on how he plays, if the year is trending toward most likely out of the playoffs or something, then maybe even send him home a little early just to make sure, talk to him, agree on that. Maybe around the deadline, you just say, hey, we're buying you out or trading you this summer. We all know where this is headed. How about for both of our sake, you avoid injury, take it easy, take some time off, and we'll figure it out in the summer. But if they can just get through from October to February, half the year, 55 games, whatever, then next summer, I do think you could flip him for something, longer-term money that another team wants off of, or buy him out yourself, or stretch him if you want to, whatever it might look like, and then you're off of it. But I just don't think any of the other options are worth the long-term pain when really at this point you're talking about one more season of dealing with it. And they've been able to get enough depth around this now where keeping him isn't so painful like it would have been.
Yeah, exactly.
If they were really thin team and then you're eating a roster spot, that's hard. But now with the way that they've handled the draft and everything, I feel a lot better that they have some other options to give minutes to, whether he's a bit player or whether they do end up kind of sending him home at some point.
Dude, I just don't get it. I don't understand this infatuation with wanting to send him home so bad or wanting to trade him so badly to the point where you're giving up draft capital to do so. It doesn't make any sense. Just let him play off the bench. He's a really expensive insurance policy where, listen, guys get injured. Bradley Beal is kind of a nice guy to have off the 8-7. If Brad doesn't want to be moved just anywhere, then he has to accept that his role is going to change on this team. So I don't really understand.
And I think he has to be, of course, aware of that, right? I mean, it already happened 100%. To him this past season. 100%. And he's the one, exercising his flexibility, and the team's going to have to do what they need to do in response to that. Let's get to our favorite minimum targets the Suns may have. The taxpayer mid-level exception. Maybe some of the guys we bring up could be fit into that if they get it. But let's also cover the roster spots. How many people can they actually bring in, starting with Chris Paul next? First, today's show is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. It's that time of year. Summer sports are in full swing. Whether you're about baseball, under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting, and you're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. They mentioned golf, soccer, and baseball. I've been telling you guys to hammer the W for a while because the favorites are massive most of the time. If you happen to listen to this on Sunday, you've got the Seattle Storm minus 250, the Minnesota Lynx minus 4,500. I'm not sure if this episode will be out in time for you to do that, but put your money down, $5. Cross your fingers, you get that first win, and you get $150 in bonus bets. So if you're new to FanDuel, open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Ben, let's keep it rolling here. So we're going to each get to our top minimum players that the Suns could bring back. That is going to be their main way of adding new players to the team if they want to do that. But, well, let's start with Chris Paul because that's the news. Let's get to it. Mark Stein, we've briefly mentioned this. I think we had some questions during our live shows after the draft days last week that people were curious about our thoughts on Chris Paul, but we haven't really gone in depth on it. So Mark Stein, right before we hit record today, said, a return to the Phoenix Suns for Chris Paul is emerging as a tangible possibility in NBA free agency. He went on to say, league sources tell the Stein line that a reunion with the Suns is indeed possible if Tyus Jones leaves Phoenix in free agency. What are your thoughts now that it seems to be becoming a lot more real that CP could return for what might be his final season?
Are you asking my thoughts on what I think the Suns are potentially choosing between, whether Tyus or Chris Paul, or are you asking me if I want Chris Paul back?
You can take the show wherever you'd like to take it.
It sounds like to me that the Phoenix Suns are interested in Chris Paul if Tyus Jones doesn't return. And that's the way obviously I didn't read it, you did. That's the way I took that to heart, was that the Suns are interested in Chris Paul being here, but only if Tyus Jones doesn't want to be back. And to be honest with you, I kind of get that. If Chris Paul comes back to the Suns, it's not going to be something where I'm moaning and groaning and don't want Chris Paul here. He did a lot of good things here. I do think, actually, in this point of career, he could help the Suns. I think Tyus Jones, with the Suns roster last year, is not nearly as effective as he is with this roster this year. This team has gotten bigger. They've got more defensive depth. They've got wing depth. I think that makes it easier to hide Tyus Jones's deficiencies, especially defensively, for him to be able to be a viable player off the bench for the Suns team. Listen, man, he's still 29 years old. I thought for the most part offensively, he actually played pretty well. He shot 41% from three last year.
He shot the ball well. I would say every other aspect of him
the
on
floater
offense
wasn't,
was a minus.
The floater wasn't great, but also he wasn't.
I don't care about the floater. I'm saying the main thing you get Tyus Jones on your roster to do is be the lead playmaker for your team.
Yeah.
I don't think he really did a fantastic job of doing that. Now,
the
team was playing like they hated each other and had never met one another for the entire 82 games, so I'm not going to put that all on him. But that was the sell, and he didn't even do that very
How many times did you and I talk about Tyus Jones not being utilized correctly after games? Why is he even on the floor if he doesn't have the ball in his hands? Why are we letting him being exposed defensively? You and I talked about that ad nauseum. I think with this team, when you don't have a Kevin Durant, and there's probably not going to be a ton of Bradley Beal on the floor, I think the ball will be in Tyus Jones' hand more often. I think him being able to facilitate a little bit more with this team. There's a decent amount of shooters: Dylan Brooks, Devin Booker, Mark Williams, maybe not so much, but guys that can catch lobs now with Malowak and Mark Williams now. I think he fits better with this team, better than Chris Paul does. Chris Paul looks like he's heading towards the end of his career. He mentioned, we saw that report, he wants to play closer to home because he's starting to wind down his career. I love Chris Paul. I'm not interested in being the place where he goes and retires. Also, he's 40, and I mean, he was fine with the Spurs last year, but you can definitely see the difference with Chris Paul with the Warriors and the Spurs than what he was with the Phoenix Suns just a
of
few
course,
years ago.
He's 40. I mean,
He's
so
just a
my
different
thing
player.
is-
He's just a
yeah,
different player.
but look, I think that there's a chance. I mean, both of these guys on the whole are probably going to be minus players next season. They're minimum players.
Probably.
They're not going to be positives.
That's fair.
And the team's not trying to win games. I mean, they're trying to win. Okay, that wasn't the right way to phrase it.
Yeah,
They are
I think
trying.
they're trying to win.
Okay, let me rephrase. They're
Yeah.
trying to win games. They're not going to win games.
Fair.
They're not a team where when you put the roster together, you're trying to think about every little square inch of ground you can get against every opponent every night. They're not the Thunder or the Nuggets or the Cavs or the Celtics before Tatum's injury. So, to me, what I like about Chris Paul, and you actually skipped over the point you made before the show that I thought was
I was
the
going
most
to make.
impactful
I was going to make
one,
that point too.
which
the fact
is that Tyus is going to push the pace for this team.
Yeah.
That is the fit part that I think is the best argument to
Yeah.
put Tyus in this slot over Chris. But what I would say is the effect of putting Chris in, the best argument for that would be, one, I think he's a better playmaker even at 40 than Tyus is at 29. So the idea of developing Williams and Malawach would go a long way. I also think Chris, as a locker room guy, I don't really feel like we ever heard much about Tyus. He's a good dude, nice guy, very pleasant.
really
we
nice.
all interviewed him. He
he's
issues
really
with
nice.
him. But I don't get the impression that he's impacting the interpersonal dynamics of the team at a really high level the way that you know Chris will. So that would be another thing I would say. And then the last part is, I don't think either guy, in my personal opinion, should be playing that much because it feels like they're going to start Jalen Green at quote-unquote the point guard spot, whatever. The two guards that are going to start are going to be Book and Green. And then I think Colin Gillespie should be getting a lot of minutes for this team. So what are we really speaking about in terms of role, big picture here? And to me, if I'm saying they're probably both going to be negative,
That's a good point.
they're not going to play a ton. Which one do I want? Well, I want the guy who's a better veteran presence, and I want the guy who has specific ways he's going to make the young players better rather than just a dude who maybe could make the tempo a little faster, maybe is a better shooter or whatever. Like, I don't care about that stuff for a team that's going to be, hey, maybe they're 500 in the best case scenario.
Because of all those things you said, it made me more firmer on the point that I'd rather have Tyus than Chris Paul. And I didn't mention this, and I definitely should have. It's literally the main point I said to you was, I go back to that Nuggets series in 2023 where Chris Paul got injured in game 2. Cameron Page started game 3, game 4, and actually he was really good in game 6. You just forget about it because they got annihilated in that game. The Suns need to push the pace way more. With Chris Paul, loved him here when he was in his prime. His ability to get to the mid-range and knock it down like it's an open free throw is great. He facilitates really well. We did that enough with Kevin Durant, Chris Paul over the years of playing really slow. Having someone come in similar to a campaign type or maybe even Tyus Jones, but what I really like what you said was Colin Gillespie, someone that could push the tempo a little bit and facilitate well. I would agree with you. If Chris Paul comes here, just want to say it again, I'm not going to be against it. I just don't know how well he's going to take with potentially taking a back seat to Colin Gillespie. And I don't know if you could start both those guys at the same time, too. Not start, but put those guys on the floor at the same time. So I think you're starting one or the other. And I'd feel better about starting Gillespie over Jones.
I don't think
Gillespie
either one is
Paul.
starting, though, bro. I
Not
think
starting.
It's
starting.
Booker and Green.
Sorry. What I mean is on the floor at the same time. What I mean when I say starting, that you're right. That's not the right words. What I'm trying to say is when one guy is on the floor and one isn't. And I don't think you can have both of those guys on the same floor, Gillespie, Tyus Jones, or Gillespie and CP3. And I'd rather, as you said it as well, a guy that I just forget about sometimes, I'd rather him be pushing the tempo more than either of those guys.
Yeah.
And because of Chris Paul and how great he is and how awesome he is, I think he might have a little bit more of a problem with that than Tyus Jones does.
Yeah, we haven't heard, what if it is his final season, all that sort of stuff. And he has prioritized getting to play, over the past 2 seasons with Golden State and San Antonio. But he's number 3 on my vet minimum list. We'll get to that in a second. I want to talk about roster spots really quickly before we get to our lists, because as I look at it right now, John Gambadoro reported late last week in the aftermath of the draft that he has an expectation that Grayson and Royce could still be on this team. We're going to talk about how Nick Richards' team option just got picked up in the next segment. That all could change. Nick Richards could be dumped. Grayson and Royce, things could change if an opportunity comes up to move them out. I definitely don't think they're untouchable. I think it's more about a lack of demand for those guys is why they might stay. But with all that said right now, I'm just going to read the names, whatever. We know who they are, but I'm just going to do it. Booker, Beal, Grayson, Royce, Malawach, Williams, Gillespie. He's not fully re-signed, but we expect he will be. Dunn, Oso, Fleming, Richards, Green, and Brooks. That's 13 players, okay? Then we have Jalen Bridges. We don't know what their plans are with him. He was on a two-way. They could bring him back on a two-way. Let's just assume they do that. And then Kobe Brea, let's assume they put him on a two-way, just for the sake of, if they don't and they bring both those guys back on real contracts, we have 0 roster spots to talk about right now. So let's just say those guys are on two-ways and the Suns have 2 roster spots. That's what we're talking about. So when you're dreaming up all these players you want to see the Suns potentially take a look at, keep in mind that their roster is pretty full because they did a 1-for-3 trade with KD. They conjured a player out of 2 picks with, well, I guess Micic, but they thought they were going to cut him. So then they got Mark Williams, and then they got, 2 players in the second round when we thought they might potentially take 0 for all we knew. So that's where we're at. Any thoughts?
In terms of all those players, I would agree with you.
Well, just the roster spot situation. Did I overlook anything?
No,
do you think those guys are going to be gone? Do you think they'll bring Brea on a main contract? There's a lot of stuff that could
I
be
think there's a
there.
chance Brea gets a main contract, but I'm not going to overhype a second-round pick too much. So let's wait till we see what he does in Summer League before we go that far. But for now, I'd probably agree with you. I think he's more a two-way contract, but I think it's clear Gillespie needs to be a fully contract. Like, he needs to be on the team next year.
He can't sign another two-way, Gillespie. It's not allowed.
I did not know that.
So
I didn't even know that. So there you go. Why can he wait? Okay, wait. So
because he's past his 3rd year of his NBA career. You can't sign him you can't sign LeBron James to a two-way or something. You know what I mean? It's only for your first 3 seasons.
Okay. Well, I would agree with you. That's probably what the roster's looking like. Also, when you and I get into our vet minimum guys, which we will in just a second, I will say this. I am not putting as much stock in these players anymore. This is literally just to fill out roster spots so that guys, the 10th, 11th, 9th man on the roster, can get minutes when they play Detroit on a random day in March. Like, we can't be putting so much stock in these. We've been burned by these guys for the past 2 seasons.
I don't think they're going to play much is the reality.
Nope.
I mean, with how the team's being built. But I do think you have to be realistic, right? Beal's going to get hurt. Mark Williams is probably going to have some injury issues just based on their track record. I don't want that to happen, but that tends to happen. And, they are young guys. If somebody has a real cold spell, Ryan Dunn goes cold, or, Fleming doesn't really cut it as a rookie, you want to have some options. So let's go quickly through these because we're going long here. So I said Chris Paul was my number 3. Number 2, I had Amir Coffey from the Clippers. He kind of lost minutes down the stretch for them. I think he's athletically limited, but he can shoot it. He's 6'7". He's a vet. I just like the idea of adding a wing who can play because, again, I don't know if Fleming's going to be ready year 1. I'm not sure if Dunn is somebody that you want to be force-feeding minutes upon minutes because we saw his confidence fluctuate and everything. He should be starting. He should be playing a lot, but I want to have some insulation behind him. That's all I'm saying. And then number 1, I have Chris Boucher.
Oh, wow.
From Toronto. So he is 32. He's coming off a contract where he made like $10 million, but, he's older. He's pretty limited. I just look at how they built the roster with Fleming and even the guy that they brought in for a two-way that I should have mentioned, actually, CJ Huntley. I forgot to say his name. They brought him in, according to reports, on a two-way. He's 6'10", like spacing 4. I just think that they liked the idea of what Cleveland did with Mobley last year, and I think they're trying to get some guys who at least can seem like they play similarly to Mobley, and Boucher is a close approximation to that I could actually see getting some minutes if he falls all the way to being a minimum type guy. What is your list?
Yeah, really quickly. Number 3, it's a old Valley boy, Cameron Payne, guy who I like to be able to come off the bench and push the pace with this team. Just a guard to have on here. Number 2, I think this guy is going to be a vet minimum guy, and the Suns still, I think, have a little bit of a problem in the front court. Larry Nance Jr. Just really quickly, do you think he's going to be a vet minimum guy, or do you think he's going to get more money?
Let me see how many games he played last year, because that's the only thing. If he's healthy, he's nowhere near a minimum player. He played 24. He played 24. So I think he was hurt a lot last season, and that's always been the problem. But when he's healthy, he's way beyond being a minimum guy. So it's just a matter of health.
Well, way beyond a minimum guy, but he hasn't necessarily gotten a contract that has reflected that. He's made, I think, neither of his contracts were super hefty. This one, and then let me ask you this one, man. Is
He's coming
Malcolm
off
Brogdon
a contract where he made 11. So he's kind of in that Boucher camp like I had, where it's like maybe, but who knows?
Malcolm Brogdon, do you think he is going to be a vet minimum guy?
I don't.
I don't think so either. If he was, he'd be my number one. My number one guy, I'm just looking for front court depth here. I think I'm going to go with Thomas Bryant because of the reason that you had mentioned before. The Mark Williams issue, where Mark Williams can get injured. I just want a guy that can step in, spot start. So I like Thomas Bryant here. And again, when I list these three guys, they're not super inspiring because I'm no longer putting all my faith into these guys. Actually, the person I like the best to fit here is Campaign because I think he can still push the pace and shoots the three ball effectively. And come in and be that guy behind Colin Gillespie.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's get to the Nick Richards news and what it means for the second apron next. First, today's show is brought to you I'm going to cut that out. There's no ad.
Forget even cutting it out, man. People want to see us as human self, dude. Sometimes we make mistakes. That's what happens.
Nick Richards had his team option picked up for $5 million. We weren't sure exactly if they would do that, but I think I was 90% sure that they would because he should have some trade value. You don't want to cut him because that doesn't do you any good. You lose a good player, a rotation caliber NBA player for absolutely nothing that you just gave up 3 seconds for. But then when I was tweeting like, oh, they must be good, they're going to trade him. I got some pushback on this, Ben, because people were like, similar to what you just said with Thomas Bryant, for instance, or my thoughts, I guess, a little with Chris Boucher, although he's more of a 4, I would say, is, well, hey, Mark Williams is pretty injury prone. Malawach is raw and a rookie. You're not going to say he's your 100% starter that's going to be a positive player for you. So maybe keep him. I don't mind that, but what do you think?
Yeah, hell no. I do mind that. We just selected Kaman Malawach with the 10th overall pick in the draft. I know he's raw, but if Mark
but
Williams
I don't think
goes
anybody's
down,
saying to play him over Nick
No,
Richards
no,
over Malawach, just to be clear. I
No,
don't think anyone would say that.
They're saying I think what I got from you is Malawach, you might want to have someone ready in case Mark Williams goes down and Malawach isn't ready yet. Like, I don't care about any of that. I'd rather just have a vet minimum guy. It is not worth it to me to keep Nick Richards on this team as a luxury. You're not trying to win a championship. If I can get, I think you're going to think I'm a little crazier. I think they're going to get 3 second-round picks for Nick Richards, which is basically exactly what you gave up for Nick Richards.
Why would a team do that if they said, "Hey, you gave that up for him in February, and it's now been a half a season, so he has less time on his contract. He only has 1 year now instead of 1.5, and we're not as desperate as you were. Why would we pay you what you just gave up just to make you happy?"
I don't think that's not true. I do think teams are going to be a little desperate. Look at the center market in free agency, man, especially for teams
There's a ton of
that don't have money. Who do you like? Who do you like better than Nick Richards? Because I disagree with you. I think the
Brooke
Lakers,
Lopez, Clint Capella, Miles Turner,
sure,
Mo Wagner.
Okay, wait, quickly. Sure, yes.
Al Horford, Luke Cornett, Larry Nance
all
Jr.
those players are going to get more than
Looney.
Nick Richards. Those players are all going to get more than Nick Richards. With the words I said,
I'm not sure all those guys are going to
players.
get more than $5 million. And even if they are, it's because they're better. So
well,
I'm fine if I'm going to get them.
I agree that they're better. But if you're
maybe if I'm a team, I'd rather give one of those guys the taxpayer mid-level than trade assets to get Nick Richards.
But if you are a team like the Lakers who are strapped for cash and have a player like LeBron breathing down your throat, you are trying to get someone like Nick Richards in and then potentially use your whatever. I think they're in the first apron. So
I'm not saying nobody will trade for him. I'm just saying I think even just based on principle, it's like the car driving off the lot concept. I don't think the Suns are going to get back what they just gave up because that's not how value works. They just had to take a hit with KD for the same reason, right?
Is 2 second-round picks too much then? I think that they're going to get something like that.
1 or 2 would probably be my guess.
And I'll say that they're going to get 2.
Probably not like a player of any real magnitude back.
Just
you're just kind of reshuffling the deck with your picks. Yeah.
And what if we, and just so we're clear, like those have been pretty valuable for the Suns. They're pretty good at maneuvering through the draft with those second-round picks. So the more you can get, the better. I do think Nick Richards
we're on the same page. They should trade him. I just want to pump the brakes a little on like them getting too much back because he only has 1 year left and he couldn't even really be a full-time
Yeah, he
rotation
wasn't
player
that
for
great,
them
dude.
last year. Exactly. So
He wasn't
there
that
you
great.
go. But that brings us to the question. So, okay, if they trade him and they get no player back, outside of, I guess, a minimum player. If they got a minimum player, that doesn't count against the cap, and I think that they'd be in the clear. Then they could cut Cody Martin, which we should know about on Monday, although I'm a little nervous that that's going to come out by the time we record. Real quick, just since it might, do you think they cut Cody Martin?
I think you should at this point. As much as I liked having Cody Martin here, like in terms of just a cap, like just cap relief. As much as I like Cody Martin here, as little as he was playing, you have too many guards. There's no reason to tax yourself literally even more, monetarily speaking, for that.
Agreed with you. I would say he's more of a forward. I would say that the fact that they want to give Dunn minutes and Fleming is in the building and
sure,
Brooks
but he's kind of a small.
He's more of what's blocking him out.
He's kind of a small forward, and not small forward. I mean, like a smaller forward.
Okay. Well, yeah, but he can't shoot and he can't handle the ball, so he's to me a forward. And that's
but hell, is he a gritty guy?
You want to give those minutes to those guys, and so yeah, agreed. I think but they could also do something similar to what they just did with Nick Richards, and guarantee him with the idea that they could trade him. But where I'm getting to with all of this is, right now, if the Beal situation goes like you and I think, where he'll be on this roster on opening night, if Gambo is right that as of now they don't have any great options of trading Grayson and Royce, the only way to get under the second apron is to get rid of Richards and get rid of Martin, because they added money in the Durant trade, if I'm adding up correctly, when it was all said and done. They obviously added money with paying Mark Williams instead of the 29th overall pick. That's more money. They traded Micic, so they don't get to cut him. He is Mark Williams now. And then the Beal thing's not there, like I just said. So I just can't imagine that they would be willing to pay into that second apron. I mean, it's not paying more, I guess I should say. Take the hit of the limitations you have and be in that second apron. And then still, every dollar you cut of money overall is just that much lower on your luxury tax bill, regardless of the aprons. So I don't think that they'll want to deal with that either. I think that they will want to cut money. So maybe it is just as simple as get rid of Richards and Martin and take no money back. Maybe that's just what this is going to end up turning into. But if not, I'm a little confused what they do. And then they don't get the access to the taxpayer mid-level, and somebody like Brogdon or any of the dreamier free agency targets, like that's not even there, and we're back to square one with basically can't do anything.
I think just my prediction, they trade Richards, they get nothing back except second round picks. There's money cut there, and they cut Caleb Martin. I don't see that there's going to be a market for Caleb Martin either. Like maybe Cody Martin, Caleb Martin. Either way.
Martin.
Regardless, they're not going to be on my team in a second here anyways.
Okay.
I don't care about which Cody it is.
You said the other one again after the end.
They're twins, all right? I don't care about which one it is.
Okay.
Cody Martin. Caleb Martin's the good one, although neither of them are really
exactly.
good.
That's the big difference, is one of them is
Cody,
actually done some cool things in the NBA, and you might want to have him on your team. The other one
outplayed Jason Tatum in a game 7, by the way. But Cody Martin, maybe the Suns move him. I doubt it, though. I'm sure they just cut him. They're just going to cut the guy.
We heard that the Miami Heat,
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That was kind of a weird little thing that popped up there, and I think it might have been part of the KD trade, potentially, was where that came out of. But
also, it's just picks too. I'm not saying they're going to get anything back. I think they just get like a second round pick back for him.
I think they might have to attach a second to Cody Martin to get rid of him potentially.
Okay, then no.
It's
then we're
$9
just cutting
million.
him. Then we're just cutting him.
Yeah.
As it's not worth it to me to trade Cody Martin. I'm good.
You can just
unless maybe they trade it. Maybe they trade a second round pick, and with the contingency of the second round pick that they get back is better. Maybe, but no, I don't see it. No.
It's probably just that. As of right now, the Suns are $11.4 million into the second apron. Those two guys combined
they'll get under it.
13.7. So you'll be 2.7-ish, 2.3, let's say, under it if you do that. They basically have no chance of getting under the first apron unless they get rid of Brad. And that might just be where they are. And that would still be limits in terms of the trades, limits in terms of you get hard capped if you do certain things, but you do get the taxpayer mid-level if you're over the first apron but under the second apron, and you don't get your picks frozen. So it's definitely a better place to be, but not Not ideal for a team that's still going to be scraping for 35, 40 wins, you know?
Yeah, let me just ask you a quick, just yes or no question. In the previous couple of years, it has been pretty noisy for the Suns during free agency. You assume it's going to be pretty quiet tomorrow?
If unless they can trade Royce or Grayson in the next couple days, I think it's going to be pretty quiet.
So okay, yeah. So you and I both agree that most of the heavy
those are the
lifting is done.
dominoes, right?
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to trade those guys either. Just from Gambler's reporting, it doesn't sound like they're going to trade those guys either. So I would agree with you, man.
All right, that'll wrap us up. Hit follow, hit subscribe if you have not already. The fireworks will be going on Monday. I believe it starts at 3 Phoenix time. We'll have an
Fireworks
episode
on
for
Friday,
you Monday
too.
night to get you all caught up to date. Enjoy your Monday. We'll talk to you then.